comes seeming like she's a sweet old lady, but she's coming with stormtrooper quotes or something of that nature. What was his name?
Well, you know, Judith, I actually saw the head of the Kinsey Institute speak of you in a very praised and hushed tone, in terms of recognizing your authority as the world's preeminent critic of the Kinsey Institute. I forget the guy's name now, but he's the guy that's there
Bancroft?
now. I think so, yeah.
With a British accent?
No, he was very American. He looked almost like Kinsey. He looked like this well-bred, you know, a middle America, you know, representative.
Recent. It was recent.
Yeah, it was relatively recent.
Yeah. Oh, God, I remember his name. No kidding.
Yeah. Well, that's because, Judith, you have become the point person for the entire topic of the war on morals in the Western world. I mean, you get to a very fundamental issue with your research, which, again, it goes back to Kinsey and his infamous report where he was sexually abusing infants as early as 3 years old in order
No, 2 months.
Oh my
2
God.
months old. 2 months old. I mean, it still blows my mind. Where
criminal.
is everybody?
Well, the thing about Kinsey, and I think we should talk about it briefly, but what I find so interesting is that he was backed by powerful forces like the Rockefeller Institute, and that his research was catapulted around the world. It was almost like the way Darwin was catapulted in 1849.
But Darwin didn't have the CIA and Rockefeller pushing him.
Well, he had that in his day. I mean, he had all the establishment loved him, and he redefined the way we looked at ourselves. Suddenly, instead of a God in heaven, and we're created in his image, we became like animals. It was like the ultimate equivalence. And now you have Kinsey after World War II, and after sex education was looking for a means to be sanitized. They found this well-spoken Midwestern professor who studied, I think he was a mathematician, or he studied the gallbladder.
Entomology.
Bugs. He put on a bow tie. Yeah, he's a bug expert. At the University of Indiana, of all places.
Yeah.
And he then engages in this sexuality research, on both men and women. In the case of women, he tended to pick up prostitutes and criminals, and do this research on their sexual attitudes. In the case of men, he focused on homosexuals and criminals. And then he published these two books, one in 1948, one in 1952, that were presented as the
53.
reflection. 53, thank you. That were presented as scientific works and a very accurate reflection of the sexuality of American men and women. It's astounding.
But what was really, what really struck me, Chuck, do I call you Chuck or Chuck?
Chuck is fine. Chuck is fine.
What really struck me was why, I had a grant from the Department of Justice, for crying out loud. I was working with the FBI. So what happened? Why did they stymie? Why the stonewalling? Why the discrediting? Why everything that followed? Threatens to sue me, threatening to do all kinds of things. What happened? And I knew the Rockefellers, of course, were strong, and I knew that it turned out that they were being paid, what was it, $50,000 a month?
Oh my God, that's a lot of money, especially back then.
Gray and Company, like Gray and Company, to discredit me. Okay, for a couple of years it was. They never offered me the money. Why not? I could have just retired, for crying out loud. So, why all that focus? Why all that effort to stop what the Department of Justice started.
Right,
You,
right. Well, there was something about the kind of the clearing of the deck to make room for the Kinsey report by some people in the establishment, because it looks like they wanted to legitimize, sexual license in this society. And they understood at some level that by pushing out the conventional mores of sexuality and legitimizing the alternative was a way of controlling and denuding and weakening American individualism, American sovereignty. You know, it was the perfect way to make people docile. To appeal to make to legitimize prurient interest as a virtue. And the thing that's also troubling about the Kinsey reports were that they ended up being used in courtrooms
oh
to
yeah. Oh
legitimize various sexual laws that had been in place and to throw them out.
yeah.
It led to an easy, it eased
I'll,
divorce
I'll
laws, it eased
I'll never
morals
forget.
laws. Yeah,
I'll
please.
never forget the day that I realized about the legal issue. I always kind of wondered, but I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and then I had no money. I was out on
Right.
my butt, thrown out of American University. Thank you very much. Don't call us, we won't call you, kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, was when I read what's her name, the lawyer. She was the lawyer for Dukakis.
Susan Estrich.
Estrich, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I read a paper by Estrich, which was published by, I think it was Harvard or Yale, I don't remember which one, and about rape. And in her paper, she writes about the changes in the law. American Law Institute Model Penal Code, changed. And then she kind of asked a sort of ambivalent kind of question, which was, gee whiz, the laws were so much stronger for women under the patriarchy than they are now, since our liberal progressive lawyers have had their way. So what was that about? And I thought, wait a minute. So then I had my friend Charlie Rice, yeah. He was a lawyer over in Notre Dame. I wrote him and I said, Charlie, can you look up and see what laws, were traceable to Kinsey, changes? I mean, how many times was he referenced? And so Charlie wrote back and he gave a bunch of references, which were important. They weren't trivial.
Not at all.
No. So I wrote back to Charlie and I said, that makes a lot. Thank you very much. But there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And so he wrote back a kind of a little testy, saying, Judy, we just have, we only have what we have and can't make it up. So I said, well, look up the American Law Institute Model Penal Code. How often has that been referenced? From when to change the American laws? Well, it turns out that their very first draft in 1955 on sex offenses, it was 100% Kinsey, sodomy, Americans are all doing this, right? So, and the most recent was 2003 in the Lawrence versus Texas sodomy decision, where Kennedy, smart man that he is not, quotes from the 1955 Model Penal Code, American Law Institute Model Penal Code, and says, based on this, the code, this is what they found, blah, blah. Sorry, that model penal code was completely in 1955 standing on the sodomy statutes that derived from Kinsey. There were 6 pages to him, devoted to Kinsey. What? But it was too late.
So you had Kinsey's studies, which have now been proven by you, Judith, almost single-handedly to be, there you go, to be false and to be agenda-driven and to be completely unscientific, used as a means to change American laws by weakening morals laws. I mean, whether it be divorce, pornography, rape, sexual assault. Today you've got feminists talking abortion, of course, that led to Roe versus Wade. And you have feminists today, and rightfully, complaining about rape and sexual assault if it's somebody that they don't like. If it's Joe Biden, no problem. But they don't want to look at the well, sure. But if you look at the history of that, you'll find that it literally was weakened by the Kinsey report. But even worse, it really affected the culture. It affected the way we see ourselves. It affected Hollywood. Hollywood threw out their morals clauses, which were part of the Hollywood system right up to the 1960s, where like an actor or actress who worked at Hollywood had to sign a morals clause. No longer, that was thrown out. And of course, then the movies began to, I think, starting with Ingmar Bergman, the Swedish movie maker, it began to introduce sex as a mainstream thing.
We bring the foreign films first.
Right. Well, that's right. That's where it all started.
Yeah.
And that, of course, led to...
That's sophisticated, right?
Well, it was all done under the guise of it was artistic, right?
Yeah. Playboy did that. Playboy's first real serious images of children. I won the case in the Netherlands against Playboy.
Wow.
For slander.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Playboy slandered you? Wonderful.
No, no. And they claimed I slandered them because I said that Playboy was producing child pornography since 1954 in cartoons, but then it graduated to within 10 years to photographic material and so on. And so I said, they're child pornographer. And at the time in 1994, I said they were the biggest child pornographer, commercial child pornographer in the world, which was true back then, not anymore maybe. But anyway, so they finally, all these years I've been telling him, sue me, right? And they tried in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands,
Thinking they were going to get a more liberal audience there?
Oh, yes, of course. Gosh. So I'll never forget it. So the TV show that I had said this, on, it was a Christian television show. They were panicking. We're going to lose everything. We're going to lose, and then they're going to put us in jail. And so I said, it's okay.
It's scary.
So, yeah. So I filled the trunk kind of, full of original pictures with the dates, with the page numbers and everything, and shipped it out. And the judge looked at all that and he said, Dr. Reisman has proven that this is child pornography. There's no question about it. This is a child's in bed with an old man, she's not clothed, or whatever. And this was before, and then of course there were the photographs. And he said, I guess it was a he, must have been a he. So they refused to grant Playboy the decision. They ruled in my favor. And so then Playboy, I'm sure it must have been Burton Joseph, their lawyer. He detests me. Okay, So then they complained. Playboy said, well, we want you to, re-examine. And so the judge said, well, you can do that in your country. I think you have the resources. Why don't you sue her in your country? Which they would never do then, and they still will not do now. And let me announce on your program, please sue me for saying what I said, that you're producing child pornography, and you've been producing, since the 50s. You can sue me here. Perfectly reasonable.
Judith, what is their agenda exactly? I mean, we know that they're trying to strip away the innocence of children. And that can be as young as you say, like infant.
Yeah.
We know that, Planned Parenthood, for example, gives sex ed counseling to public schools where they rationalize such activity by saying, well, I mean, sex is everywhere, so why not have it in the schools?
We have to show them. We have to teach them. We have to teach them how everything works.
Exactly.
Both backwards and forwards.
Well, I guess that I'm asking you, why are they doing this? I mean, are they crazy? I mean, what's going on here?
No, not crazy. I mean, it's the brave new world. It's the new world order. As I have recently traced, I didn't think I could see anything new that I hadn't reported on about Kinsey, for crying out loud. But I got a 1951 Look magazine article, which in the mail from a colleague. It said, we thought you'd be interested in this. Whoa. And it was never, the one that they sent me is not even on Indiana University Kinsey Institute site. I mean, they don't have it anywhere. They have all the have this one. So and that article.
Whoops, we're getting some kind of. I'm getting some interference here. Oh well. It's let me just see here. Oh, thank you for that little musical interlude. All right, so I'm doing a more of an open lines show, so I'm sort of trusting people to come in and contribute, hopefully with some thought. But I don't mind a little.
Are we taping?
No, yeah, and we're live.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, we've been live. I mean, that's what I'm doing now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's a great, the technology now, Judith, is amazing. I go live now every afternoon at noon, and I'm seen on about 5 platforms, including YouTube, and then it downloads and archives into an audio podcast, and it's really quite something. I mean, it's I'm able to do an end run around the old-fashioned radio.
We did well though when we used to do that free speech one.
Yeah, and plus, remember, I had my co-host Dr. Patrick O'Heffernan.
Yes, I remember.
Sure.
Because I remember there was one time there's something I said and he said, "Okay."
Oh well, he got very testy. I mean, it was sort of left-right radio, and he was the man on the left. Yeah. He did not. He just would. His tactic, and it's typical actually of the left, would be that he would just ignore you and forge forward with something that had nothing to do with what we were talking about. It was like a major diversion. I mean, nothing, not to cast aspersions here. That's.
No, he's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. I mean,
but there was one time where he was absolutely on the other side. The left, and I said whatever it was I said, and he said, "Okay." He said, and he had to agree. And I thought, well,
that's unusual.
It was very unusual. Well, anyway.
But Judith, getting back to the unfortunate subject we're talking about, I heard talk show host Tim Considine. I don't know if you know him. He's very good. He's in Washington, D.C. He predicted that within the next 3 to 5 years, pedophilia in this country is going to be legal. and that he says
That's
that the
fine.
media and Hollywood and the kind of the visual media are prepping us and have been doing so now for many years, and that the way they're going to do it is by referring to pedophilia as an orientation
Right,
as
of
opposed to a
course.
perversion.
Sure.
And once it's put in the category of orientation, then you can't touch it, because after all, someone can't help their orientations, and we have to be tolerant. So
Right.
they actually had a conference, you might know something about this, in Montreal. I think it was in around 2010, where major people got together and talked about this and how to
Are
mainstream
you kidding?
pedophilia.
Are you kidding? I attended, I will say this, then I want to go back to the 1951 Look magazine article.
Yeah.
I attended one of the major conferences that they had, the pedophile, not pedophile information exchange, no, the MAP, minority attracted persons, MAP, MAPS. Yeah, minority attracted persons, which is an interesting, use of of words.
Well, as
A,
usual, a lot of euphemisms.
yeah, yeah.
That's what they always do.
Yeah, but I went to the conference. It was in Baltimore. The reason I went was because, it was a good thing to go to, but was because Dr. Fred Berlin was identified as their keynote speaker, Johns Hopkins. And Fred Berlin at Johns Hopkins had, I think it's still running, has a grant on child abuse. He's a, pleader for don't, but his special pleading is do not make the pedophile into a monster, because he may be you. And if not you, he may be your brother, your father, and so on. Well, okay, increasingly as pornography becomes an addiction, or it doesn't have to be an addiction. I mean,
right.
My gosh, kids can just, in adults, you can just look at one that just drives you and act out on it. 1, 2, 3. You don't have to be addicted. So anyway, where was I? I was going to make a point. It was at the conference. Yeah.
Yes.
Fred Berlin, Dr. Fred Berlin, was at that conference, and they did not expect that somebody like me would show up, right? So they had to really watch their P's and Q's and M's and A's and P's, yeah, which they admitted afterwards. They thought I was going to bring the police with me. I brought Matt Barber from the university with me instead, big guy, Anyway, but the plans are clear. There were, people there from Harvard, as well as the avant-garde pedophiles. Yes, they've been pushing pedophilia since the 60s in various ways, legally. And remember, anything that becomes legal, you can teach as right in schools, in the classroom. That's the reason we're able to teach kids how to have sodomy, oral and directional, multi-directional. That's the reason we're able to promote everything that we promote, because nobody will challenge that.
So if it's legal, it's okay for them to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have adequate documentation for our law firms, our conservative law firms, our religious law firms, to go into a courtroom and challenge all this, like they should have done with the sodomy decision, Lawrence versus Texas. But the only people that I've had pick up my work have been either liberal, progressive, or just, sheriffs or something, that have done it. So that's been a huge problem. We would not be where we are today legally or in the classroom if, in my view, my humble view, our conservative law firms and our religious law firms uh, took the bull by the horns and really went after these guys. We should have won all these cases. No reason we didn't in the beginning. Now, as it's become more and more accepted, and we have more and more judges who are drinking at the pornography trough, either privately or publicly. I mean, as we have more and more people who are trained, we've had now 3 generations, since Kinsey. We're in big trouble. Yeah,
Yeah.
in big.
Well, they phrased it as in a libertarian context. It's like this is freedom and free speech, and you've got a guy like Al Goldstein, a real disgusting pig, who published Screw magazine back in the 70s, going to court and saying, well, this is free speech, and if you don't like it, that's tough. And he's fairly open about his revolutionary agenda. He was going to overthrow the social order.
Yeah,
he was,
which is the effort. The whole effort, is complete domination, destruction of the American way of life,
exactly.
which we the Black Lives Matter, the shutting down of anybody who objects, no matter how black they are. Yeah.
That gives them permission to go in and loot black neighborhoods and burn black businesses and kill black people.
Sure.
And anybody who criticizes it as something against black people. So, it's part of this overall, I would call it a communist movement. You can use this an old-fashioned word for it, but it is an attempt to disorder the society so that we can be softened up for, as you said, some kind of a new world order as opposed to the real world order, which is under God, with a moral and ethical standard that came from Sinai.
Yeah, oligarchy versus God, theocracy. Well, not even that. I mean, we had a nice balance in this country, a really nice balance with our Constitution, so long as it was listened to and adhered to. So that was the idea. To destroy it. Yeah. And they've been working at it.
And and it's the gains are there. We were talking about the legitimization of pedophilia, which I predict, and I think Tim Considine is right. 3 to 5 years from now, it's going to be accepted. We don't. If you doubt it, just ask again.
No. There's been a tremendous. People are really fighting. Look, one of the battles. Thank you very much, Catholic Church.
Sure.
Okay, one of the battles that makes it winnable, at least pedophilia, has been the attack on the Catholic Church, which everybody was already softened up for. Religion. They do bad things, right?
Sure, it's the biggest enemy of their agenda.
Right. So long as they went after the Catholic Church, and that meant that they allowed male victims. Oh, but there's another case that's just come up with the male victims in Morehouse University, Morehouse College, several male victims of sodomizing, sodomy, are apparently charging them, the professors at Morehouse, black on black. And that's the issue. Real black conservatives tell you consistently, black on black crime is enormous. And why is that? Because the children in those families and the whole there is no family. You're talking about almost 80% today of our children being raised in single parent homes, with everybody trying to celebrate the single mother. Well, very nice. Have you ever tried to raise 4 or 5 kids as a single person?
I can't imagine it.
On wheels.
I know it. I mean, I had enough raising one, and with a wife in the house. I mean,
of course.
It's huge. It's a huge job. So look, I mean, we can talk about how the left has destroyed the black community,
Yes.
starting in the 1960s with
No, no,
welfare.
no, no, no. It started. They started with Washington, D.C. We did research on this one. The first pilot study done with children of sex education was in 1950, 56 or 58, I've forgotten which. Anyway, and it was in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And they were showing obscene materials to the children, and the parents were outraged. The parents were complaining, the parents were protesting, but they weren't breaking up anybody's, you know, windows and stealing anything, but they were peacefully objecting to these white liberals with their black toadies coming into the schools and teaching their children about sex. And one of the things they said in the newspaper at the time, which was the Washington Star, one of the things the parents said was, you know, our kids are not having sex out of wedlock, and they weren't really. I mean, they were at 20% at most years, you know, in those years that were not in single parent homes. Our kids are not having sex. That we want them to stay clean. Why? Because it'll save their lives. They won't get sick. Well, I mean, of course, you know, for religious reasons and everything else, but also it's gonna destroy them, and it's gonna destroy us. So they had these objections, and our smart progressives made you know, ridiculed the parents, and went ahead with their pilot study. And you know, Washington D.C. has one of the highest rates today of single parents. Yeah, one of the highest.
I mean, it's a deliberate attempt. I mean, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was
Yeah,
Assistant Secretary of Labor under Johnson, wrote a book about this, and he said that at that time, the black family was largely intact.
yeah,
That black marriages were actually stronger than white marriages, and you had going all the way back to the Civil War, and that the programs were being recommended by the so-called war on poverty, he feared would result in a disintegration of the black family, which is exactly what they did. And that, combined with the attack on the black church by corrupt forces going back to Margaret Sanger and her Negro Project in the late 30s, where she was paying off black ministers so they could open abortion mills in black neighborhoods. I mean, she did it for race reasons. She wanted to reduce what she called dysgenic races. You know, and then you had education modalities. You remember my good friend, the late Dr. Sam Blumenfeld.
oh yeah,
I mean, a very
oh
dear friend of mine. He passed away a couple of years ago, and you know, I tried to carry on his work. He wrote a whole library, a whole bookshelf full of research on how education was corrupted by the so-called frontier thinkers like John Dewey,
yeah.
and how it was changed from a cognitive education where a young person would learn how to think on their own and be independent, to this kind of politicized behaviorist approach that was collectivist and that turned people into docile, you know, cogs in a wheel. And this particularly hurt the black family because once they removed the father and once they paid the mother to have more children out of wedlock, you had a family that didn't have a strong center. And so young children were more vulnerable to these really awful guinea pig like experiments that are being conducted by the public schools. So the result is, and we're talking here about race because that is on everyone's mind,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
result is that the left really contributed, and I think quite consciously, to the destruction of the black community. So when they point a finger of racism, I think we should take a look at really what were the policies that actually were racist.
Oh yeah. Tom, what's his name? Doctor, he was at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Sowell. Yeah.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah.
Oh golly.
Content of their character. Mm-hmm.
Oh, he has
Great
written,
man.
he has one on the YouTube. People can just go to and listen to it on intellectuals and race, intellectuals and race, I think it is. And he goes into the history of world racism, like wake up, America, right? Racism has been everywhere in the world. And the point he makes here in the United States, well, one of the points is, in terms of loans to loans to blacks and loans to white, he says, one of the groups they will never include is the Asian Chinese Americans, because in every category, Chinese Americans are given preference to whites, okay, and given preference thereby to blacks, because whoever's going to pay them back is going to be, is going to be preferred. So yes, it's not like there isn't racism. My goodness, not like we deny it. Of course, you fight racism when you find it, but you don't go trying to make it up. And
nor do you fan the flames when you do find it for political expediency.
And fanning them, you're really not just fanning the flames, but starting fires. This is not the United States.
Oh, yeah. And then lying about it as they go. I mean, even I saw the other day, Stacey Abrams in Atlanta, referring to this recent shooting, which was terrible, of this black man is shooting a black man for falling asleep in his car, which is a lie. That's not what happened. And it's a classic exploitation of a situation for political gain. Anyway, my guest is Dr. Judith Reisman. Here is her book, Sexual Sabotage. Check it out. It's available at Amazon and elsewhere. Judith, one of the agendas of the sexocrats, as it were, going back to Kinsey and probably earlier, and their big money backers like the Rockefellers, who, by the way, also bankrolled Margaret Sanger, is to, as a way to create their revolution and their transformation of society, they want to weaken the boundaries between men and women. They want to weaken
between, most important these days in terms of what's going on in the schools, to weaken, no, not to weaken, to simply destroy any boundary between the child and that's established in terms of authority, their parents. I mean,
that's an old one, yeah.
Yeah, you have to get Deborah DeGroff on your show.
Thank you.
She's done a book called, I forgot, anyway, but it's, looking at what's in your children's literature. She did an analysis of the kidlit, of child literature today. We're talking about in kindergarten, A is for activist. So, seriously, a little book, which is one of those hardback tiny things that you read to your baby who can barely read. Yeah, and from there on up, books constantly now.
Propagandized and a politicized.
Heavy propaganda, serious propaganda.
And it's all to undermine the family and to undermine the authority of the parents, particularly the father. And but going back to, they want to blur the difference between the male and the female sex as a way of kind of creating a new kind of human being. And I mean, I even heard a rabbi who was very ultra liberal, this was years ago, claim, and I don't see any evidence of this, that the Talmud has 6 different sexes in it, 6 different genders. I mean, they're making this stuff up. And this idea being that the man and the woman as sovereign, created in the image of God, which is the basis of the Torah, by the way, and Talmud, that this is somehow to be overthrown. It is the ultimate example of overthrowing Western society, of the Judeo-Christian belief system. And and it's now manifesting itself in not just transgenderism, but also this whole thing that what's his name, Epstein, was into, this transhumanism.
The transhumanism. Yeah.
This idea that the human being, the sovereign male, the sovereign female, And by the way, the book of Genesis says God created man and women in his image. So he did separate them, and they both are created in the image of God. The idea is to blur those lines in every way they can and to attack people who disagree as being somehow prejudiced and ignorant. And it goes to this whole communistic idea that everything is created, everything is a social construct. There's no such thing as objective existence. There's no such thing as actual science. It's all, construction. I mean, it goes to Marx's idea of the exploitation theory and his principles around created realities, and that once you get to that, then you say, well, who is creating the realities? The people in power. And so we have to overthrow them because they're exploiting us, and that goes to the most basic and fundamental understandings of nature. Nothing is real. There is no man, there is no woman. Everything is whatever you say it is. So you can call yourself something else, and how dare you question me for doing so?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And the main place and this is a real concern to me. The main place that this is being taught, embedded, instantiated, is in the schoolroom, in schoolrooms. Children are being so propagandized. They are traumatized, of course, in school now. I mean, you can't go to school today and not be traumatized. AP finally, the American Associated Press did a study of school activities, crimes, and so on, based on some DOJ data, NIBRIS data. And they came up with the fact that 17,000, that's what I said, 17,000 children in 1 year were being sexually assaulted, abused by other children in schools, all right, established, verified, all right. And what did they mean by sexually? We don't mean that they just had bad words tossed at them. I don't think they counted bad words. They are being sodomized, raped, sexually molested, hands-on, and I forgot what the other one was. There were 4 categories. That's in school, 17,000. Those are the ones that are reported. Chuck, this is insanity. Our little children go to schools. These are war zones. When my kids were in school years ago, I felt like they were going into a war zone at the time. Yeah. This is really a war zone. Children are traumatized in a classroom. And it isn't just when they try to go to the bathroom and you never know who's a girl or who's a boy coming into the toilet, right? And who's going to assault you in the bathroom, which is insanity. I mean, our lawyers have not beaten that out. How bad can it be?
Well, it's the liberation of the girls' locker room is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there was this one guy I read years ago. I mean, you could call him the Rosa Parks of the girls' locker room. Shows up there. He's an adult man, completely naked, in the girls' locker room, and he's like, "Well, I'm transforming into a woman." And a girl complained about it to the principal, and she was told nothing you could do about that.
Right. Yeah. And our lawyers, I blame our lawyers.
Yeah.
I blame our conservative and our people law firms that call themselves conservative or that call themselves religious. I don't blame the ACLU. No, they're going to do that. They're going to fight to have those, quote, rights for the guy to rape the girl in the bathroom. They're going to work for that, of course.
Or just whatever happened to modesty, whatever happened to the right to have a separate facility for girls. I mean, isn't that a basic?
Safety. We're talking about basic safety, which is the point is that by denying the male-female difference, you're denying that 90% of rapes are committed by MALE, men, right?
Of
Well,
course.
and on top of that, our men are being so, and our women too, are being so inundated with the pornography. I mean, what do you think
Oh
of
yeah,
this?
it's everywhere.
This is normal?
No.
No, most guys are not born thinking, oh, goody, I'm going to rape children. I'm going to rape. No, they are not born that way. They are made that way. They are made that way. The large percentage of these guys doing these horrible things are made that way. Hannah Arendt made some comments about that in one of the things she wrote. Yeah, you're not born a rapist. You're not born. And you were asked, I don't want to let that go. You asked me before, the point, well, big pharma is making a fortune from the misery of our children and our women, our men.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fortune. Not just the cut and paste transgender thing, not just that. But the medical services for every venereal disease. I mean, what, 3/4 of our kids, of our young people, have one or another venereal disease, and they're told that's normal. I'm sorry, that's not normal.
Not to mention psych drugs, and which are
Oh,
leading to suicide and murders. But Judith, we talked. I brushed on the topic of Jeffrey Epstein briefly, and we know that he was involved in these.
Oh, it was suicide.
Oh yeah, sure. But he was involved with these this like sex island in the Virgin Islands, and there's rumors that he's also connected to the same type of sex rings all over the world. He might have been connected to intelligence. There's always been this strange connection to intelligence, anyways, going back to Kinsey. But that's a whole different subject. But the point is that, I mean, I've heard that there's a lot of this going on underground amongst very elite circles, where you have people involved with pedophilia and all kinds of sexual stuff going on, where they're passing around children, and that one of the reasons why, and I don't know if you know anything about this, I'm not saying this is a fact, but I've heard this, that you have people who despise President Trump the way they do is because before Trump, the average of sex traffickers and pedophiles that were prosecuted was around 200, 250 a year. When Trump became president, that number skyrocketed well into the thousands. And that he really is taking, it's kind of a quiet thing. He might talk about it more publicly, but he doesn't. But he's really taking on this sexual predator industry, is what I would call it, and it includes Hollywood, and it includes a lot of very elite people. So that might be what's motivating this absolutely diabolical hatred that some of these Hollywood-friendly types, these late-night talk show hosts, I'm not going to mention names, but night after night, they are attacking Trump so viciously because he is moving in on that. He is starting to expose it, and and if he's reelected, it's going to be more so. He's going to really take this thing on. What do you think? Do you know anything about that, Judith?
Yeah, I follow it pretty closely. That we already know some names that have been exposed, from Charlie, what's his name? Rose, and then some of the big Hollywood muckety mucks. I mean, it wasn't just Weinstein. I mean, it's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we already know a lot of those big guys. Now, a lot of them still are not. They're still.
It's still going on.
Oh yeah. Oh, of course.
And then, of course, their movies, their magazines, their cultural instruments, of which they are huge. They reflect this.
Yeah.
They reflect this. You've got. They don't have outright pedophilia, but they have actors and actresses that can look like children involved with very sexual situations.
And they float a few pedophile films. They've floated a few trial balloons. Yeah. It's like when Playboy, when after my research came out in '84, even though they tried every way to stymie me like crazy, the fact that it was out caused Playboy to stop with the children. Yeah, in '84, '85, they pretty much cut all the kids out of everything. But they float a balloon. They would not now, but they would
Oh yeah,
float.
they toss these things. I mean, I just comes to mind
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it was that's the actor and the actress in that movie were underage, and they were in explicit sex scenes. And I heard that the two of them were too young to even go to the movie to
Oh
see it.
yeah, yeah.
You know
No,
that
yeah.
they had made.
They try everything, and all those nude scenes with the adult females that the female will say, "Oh, so I knew it was done with great artistic integrity." You know, all of them, just about ended up saying, "Well, I really didn't want to do it. Afterwards, I threw up. I had, knots in the, but
Somehow
so
it happened.
all that is to loosen the because look, we were a reasonably Puritan, puritanical, I suppose, compared to Europe,
For sure.
nation. And we did not have what Europe had. That was those films they were doing in Europe with what's his name? I don't remember. These fancy antsy.
Right. Ingmar Bergman.
All those guys.
Right. Sure.
The French, in particular, did a lot of, they is so sophisticated. Sorry, guys, you're buying a lot.
Didn't wash well in America. No.
No. What? And Playboy was really interesting because they kind of even admitted it because their Sex and Cinema, they would have these cutouts from the French films, from Ingmar's films, from other films. Those outcuts were the first where they would really use, they would be very salacious. But you see, it's a foreign film. Oh, and Pretty Baby? Come on.
That's right. She was underage at the time.
Oh,
Yes.
she was 12 years old. And it was, what's his name? Not Roman Polanski. That's another
one. That's a whole different story.
G. Yeah. Polanski. Who was the other one that produced that film? Let's see. Well, anyway, Pretty Baby, it was produced by this French guy who was married to some sexy American woman. No, British woman. Anyway, yeah, they had that child they had that child do a scene in Pretty Baby, which was 1978, I think it was, where her virginity is being sold to this group of men and women, And I mean, it was so vicious. It made me so angry. If I had been there, I would have.
Yeah. I think it was Brooke Shields. I think it was the actress at the time.
Oh yeah. She wasn't an actress. She was a kid.
That's right.
She was a kid. Yeah.
I think that was also the year that Linda Lovelace and that whole thing, was mainstreamed. Deep Throat. Remember that was in theaters for the first time.
I think that was earlier. Deep
was
Throat.
it? Okay.
My suspicion is that was earlier, but I don't remember because, frankly, the one that really upset me the most was this child.
Oh yeah, it's horrible.
That's
because it's been doctored as some kind of a mainstream innocent story. It's Deep Throat. Everyone knew what that was. This is like packaged. It's like Kinsey. They packaged it to Middle America. They make it look like your regular nice uncle. They give him a couple of degrees, and he's a professor. And,
well. Now we have a lot of professors. Thank you very much. Who've been picked up for sexually assaulting students.
Sure.
Okay, both girls and boys. There's a book out by Dr. Laurie Handrahan, Handrahan, called Epidemic, I think it is. Epidemic. I have the book somewhere here. Child rape. I forgot what but it's also on Amazon.
Sure.
You get that. She's done the only research since my research, because that's what we were supposed to be doing, by the way. We're supposed to be doing gathering data for the FBI on child sexual abuse, and it would have been by category, by profession, and so on. But we were, cut.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's done the research on that. And in terms of our professorial class, yeah, our teachers, oh my gosh. And that's female teachers as well as male teachers. Females, look, have people consume pornography, some percentage, a significant percentage, will be sexually assaulting children. They just will. That's
sure. It legitimizes everything. I mean, it becomes almost unreal.
Yeah.
Judith, listen, I really have enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate you coming on with me today. I hope that you can be a regular of mine on this program. We should really start to develop a few more issues, especially now that we're able to put it up on YouTube and all these other networks. And mention, if you don't mind, what you're working on now, any books you want to talk about.
Yes, I'm working on an oral, a podcast version of Soft Porn Plays Hardball, updating it.
Excellent.
I'm also working on the connection between Kinsey and MK Ultra.
Oh, wonderful. We'll do a whole show on that in a couple of weeks, if you don't mind. That's a great topic.
I'm delighted. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm getting that cleaned up and edited, and it's very shocking. Well,
yeah.
It was the time. He was at the right time in the right place, let's say.
Well, that's when that thing was at its height.
Yes.
Although I think it's still around. I mean, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be.
Oh yeah, I think that
the church committee exposed a lot of it in the late 1970s, but a lot of that remained classified, and a lot of it continues.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, Judith Reisman. Listen, once again, thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you again.
Thank you for having me back.
My
It's
pleasure.
delightful to be visual with you, right?
You bet. Thank you. And I'll send you the link once it's up, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Godspeed.
Au revoir. Godspeed.